All right, let's set the tone before this goes sideways. This episode is not about attacking people's beliefs.
Correct, dude. Your grandma's safe. Nobody's taking your Bible. Relax.
You see that sarcasm? That sarcasm right there is what makes people shut down.
Oh, good, because shutting down before thinking is kind of the theme of the episode today.
We're talking about institutions, churches, and organizations, not God, not faith, not spirituality.
Yeah. Just the business side of God. You know, the tax-free landowning, money managing, law influencing part.
That's already loaded.
It's fictional. Loaded would be if I said holy corporation, which I definitely didn't say out loud.
Dude, churches do good things. They help people. They help create communities.
Absolutely, dude. So does a bar. So does a gym. So does a really charismatic cult leader with a soup kitchen.
Okay, now you're being unfair.
No, I'm being uncomfortable, dude, and there's a difference.
You can't just compare churches to a corporation or a cult, dude.
Why not, dude? They freaking collect money, own property, and have, leadership hierarchies. They set rules, discourage questioning, and they promise rewards if you stay loyal.
Yeah, that's not how believers see it.
Yeah, of course not, dude. Freaking nobody inside a system ever sees the system. That would ruin the vibes.
This episode is about asking questions, not about tearing anything down.
Right. Just gently tapping the glass and noticing how fast people yell, "Hey, don't tap the glass."
Dude, you need to take a chill pill.
Yeah, dude, and you need to take some more Mucinex.
Oh my god, dude, I hate you. If you're religious and listening, please stay with us.
Yeah, dude, and if you're already mad, congratulations. You're emotionally invested. That's usually step one, dude.
Belief shouldn't be fragile.
Yeah, and truth shouldn't need bodyguards.
Right. Anyway, welcome back to The Witch Show, where smart meets stupid and somehow makes sense. My name's Georgie, and I'm thinking out loud so you don't have to.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Witch Show. From what I think seriously to you.
WITS, The Witch Show.
Cool story, bro.
Welcome back to The Witch Show. I hope you guys made it through the holiday, the sick season, and the weird stretch where everyone's tired, foggy, and running on fumes. Shoot, I know I barely did. Anyway, if your energy has been dragging and coffee just isn't cutting it anymore, today's episode is partnered with Dubby. Yes, that's right, Dubby, the clean energy drink with 0 sugar, 0 calories, and no crash. Just your smooth, focused energy that actually lasts, no jitters, no burnouts, just fuel to keep your brain on and your day moving. So, if awesomeness sounds like something you want, make sure to check them out. They got so many amazing flavors. Make sure you use code TheWitchShow at checkout for 30% off your order. It helps out the show and your wallet. And after this holiday season, well, I'm sure we're all trying to save a little money. That's actually why I buy all my stuff online these days instead of just going to a brick and mortar store. It's just cheaper. And they have way better deals. And great stuff. Speaking of great stuff, hey Jarvis, we need a Dubby song.
Low on energy, not anymore. Crack the can, I'm ready for more. Clean, no crash, keeps me steady. Use code The Witch Show. Stay sharp, stay ready.
Haha, let's go. I want to start out by saying something clearly, because context matters. I'm not mad at people who believe in something. I'm not mad at faith or spirituality or community. I'm frustrated with how churches, as institutions, operate under a completely different set of rules than everyone else, while still benefiting from the same society we all pay into. Like, for example, in the United States, churches are automatically granted tax-exempt status through the Internal Revenue Services. That means no federal income tax, often no property tax, and no requirements to publicly disclose their finances. Other nonprofits have to file financial reports. Churches don't. They're exempt by default. Are you kidding me? Oh, and that exemption isn't small. Most nonprofits have to file something called a Form 990, which publicly shows how much money comes in, where it goes, executive compensation, and major expenditures. Churches are not required to do this. They can collect donations, own land, invest money, pay leadership salaries, and move funds internally, all without public oversight. There's no regular audit requirement. There is no transparency obligation, just trust. And you're talking about organizations that can bring in millions or billions of dollars a year. That lack of oversight should bother people way more than it does. Now, like I said, I'm not harping on your religion or your God. I just really don't think that we should be operating the churches this way. It's really, really weird and it feels uneasy. Transparency isn't persecution. Accountability isn't oppression. If an organization claims moral authority, claims to guide people's lives, tell them what's right and what's wrong, how to live, how to vote, how to raise families, then why is that same organization shielded from scrutiny? Yeah, I said it. Churches still rely on public infrastructure, roads, police, fire departments, energy services, utilities. They benefit from zoning laws, public schools, disaster relief, and community services funded by taxpayers. Those services don't come from faith. They come from money everyone else has to contribute to. And let's be honest about scale for a second. Many churches aren't just small neighborhood buildings anymore. They own campuses, media companies, real estate, farmland, housing, and commercial properties. They employ staff. They operate like corporations in everything except accountability. If any other organization handled that much money, owned that much property, and exercised that much influence, public oversight would be expected, not optional. And what really gets me is how quickly questioning that structure is framed as an attack on religion itself. It's exactly why I started out this show with telling you that I'm not attacking your religion. It's framed that way. They make you feel bad for pointing out this stuff. I'll be shocked if I don't get a single comment with an objective opinion. Somebody out there saying that I'm attacking your religion. Well, I'm not. It's a question of fairness. It's a question of consistency. If you're operating in the public sphere, benefiting from public systems, and shaping public behavior, then asking where the money goes isn't hostile. It's reasonable. And when an institution reacts defensively to transparency, that's usually a sign that trust has been replaced by expectation. Because faith should never require secrecy to survive. If the mission is truly good, openness shouldn't be threatening. And when financial silence is protected more aggressively than moral accountability, it stops feeling sacred. It starts feeling isolated. And isolated power, history has shown us, never stays benign for too long. So here's where my frustration stops being abstract and starts becoming personal for a lot of people. Because this isn't a theory, it's money. It's real money. Some churches don't just operate comfortably. They operate on a scale that rivals major corporations and investment firms. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for example, controls an investment portfolio estimated to be well over $100 billion. Yeah, that's billion with a B. And that number didn't come from rumors on the internet or speculation. It came from whistleblowers, federal filings, and investigative reporting that revealed a massive investment fund that existed quietly for decades. What's important here is not just the size of that fund, it's how it was built. The primary source wasn't business ventures or private investors. It was tithing. Regular people giving 10% of their income because they were taught it was a spiritual obligation. In many cases, members were explicitly encouraged to tithe even if money was tight, even if they were struggling to pay rent or feed their families, because sacrifice was framed as obedience and righteousness. Giving wasn't just generosity, it was a measure of faith. Now give us some money or you don't believe. At the same time, that money wasn't being held in a simple reserve or emergency fund. It was actively invested in compounds and grown, parked in stocks and bonds and financial instruments designed to maximize long-term returns. And here's the part that deserves the scrutiny. The fund was not primarily used for charity. It wasn't regularly drawn down to eliminate poverty or erase medical debts or fund large-scale humanitarian reliefs. It was treated like a long-term financial asset, a hedge fund operating under a religious umbrella. Supporters will say this is responsible stewardship, planning for the future, preparing for emergencies, and to a point that does make sense. But stewardship has a line. When an organization accumulates wealth on a scale larger than most nations, while continuing to ask members for sacrificial giving, that line starts to blur. At some point, you have to ask where stewardship ends and hoarding begins. Because if organizations already have enough money to fund global humanitarian efforts indefinitely, to end hunger in multiple regions, to build hospitals, to erase entire categories of human suffering, why does it still prioritize growth over distribution? Why does the fund keep expanding while the giving message remains the same? Growth for stability is one thing. Growth for growth's sake, well, that's something entirely different. And transparency matters here. The average member contributing to the fund does not receive a clear, detailed breakdown of their money being used. They're told to trust, to have faith, to believe leadership knows best. That's not how financial relationships normally work. In any other context, asking people to give money without disclosure would raise immediate red flags. In a religious context, it's normalized, even sanctified. This is the moment where relationships stop feeling purely spiritual and starts feeling transactional. Belief becomes the engine that fuels capital, while the Capital itself operates under a different moral. The one preached from pulpit. Humility is taught, accumulation is practiced, sacrifice is demanded, and surplus is protected. And I want to be clear about something. I don't think belief is the problem. I think belief is being used. When faith is leveraged to generate wealth that functions like corporate finance with secrecy, long-term accumulation, and minimal accountability, it stops being about spiritual growth. It becomes about institutional preservation. And once faith is tied to finance at that level, questioning the money isn't seen as curiosity. It's treated as disloyalty. That's when belief stops being personal and starts being profitable. And that's the moment people deserve to start asking hard questions. Hard questions like, for example, let's talk about land, because land is power, always has been. The Catholic Church is widely recognized as one of the largest non-government landowners in the world. Not symbolically, literally. Across continents, churches own farmland, commercial real estate, housing developments, schools, hospitals, and entire city blocks. In many cases, that land is tax exempt. No property tax, no contribution to the local tax base, and that matters more than people realize. Think about it. When land is removed from the tax base, that burden doesn't disappear. It just shifts. Public schools still need funding. Fire departments still respond to emergencies. Roads still need maintenance. Utilities, they still run. Those costs get absorbed by everyone else. Homeowners, renters, small businesses. Churches benefit from the public infrastructure without paying into it at the same level as the communities around them. That's not a spiritual issue. That's a civic one. And this isn't limited to one denomination or one country. In the United States and abroad, religious institutes have accumulated land for centuries, often retaining it permanently. That gives them long-term stability, leverage, and insulation from economic pressure. The same kind of insulation that corporations and governments seek. Except churches get it while claiming moral neutrality and financial humility. Now, let's talk about what happens when things go wrong inside the institution, because history shows a pattern that's hard to ignore. Abuse, exploitation, and misconduct have repeatedly been handled internally. Not immediately reported to law enforcement, not exposed publicly, but managed quietly. Offenders resign, settlements paid, non-disclosure agreements signed, language softened, responsibilities blurred, reputation preserved. This isn't about isolated bad actors. It's about system responding to risk. Think about it. When allegations surface, the priority has often been damage control, not transparency. Like, isn't honesty part of your religion? Victims were encouraged to forgive, to pray, to stay quiet for the good of the church, and that's the cost of the silence. It wasn't theoretical. It was real people, real trauma, and real lives shaped by decisions made behind closed doors. This is the part that actually makes me angry, not because bad things happened. Bad things happen in every large organization. What matters is how those organizations responded. Any corporation that hid abuse, paid for silence, and shuffled offenders internally would be investigated, fined, and potentially dismantled. Churches were allowed to continue operating with their authority largely intact, protected by moral credibility and legal insulation. And that protection didn't come from innocence. It came from reverence, from the idea that questioning the institution was somehow worse than harm being done inside it. That's a dangerous inversion of morality. When an institution teaches forgiveness while actively avoiding responsibility, that's not grace. That's insulation. That's protection. And once moral authority is used as a shield against consequences, trust doesn't just erode, it collapses. Because people can forgive mistakes, but what they can't forgive is being told that silence is holy and accountability is hostile. At that point, the issue isn't faith anymore. It's power protecting itself. And history has shown us over and over again that power without accountability always chooses itself first. Here's where everything connects, because once you zoom out far enough, the pattern becomes hard to ignore. Vatican City is an actual sovereign nation, not symbolically, legally. It has its own governance structure, its own legal system, its own diplomatic relationships with countries around the world, and permanent observer status at the United Nations. It signs treaties, it negotiates with the governments, it operates independently of Italy despite being physically located inside Rome. And yes, it has an armed force. The Pontifical Swiss Guard has existed since 1506. They are trained, armed, sworn to defend the Pope with their lives, and operate as a standing military unit. That fact alone should permanently end the argument that churches don't function like governments. They do, just without elections, without term limits, and without public oversight from the population they influence. But here's the thing. The real power of churches isn't land, money, or even armed guards. Those are visible. The real power is psychological authority. Churches don't need armies when belief enforces itself. When questioning feels sinful, when doubt is framed as weakness, when obedience is rewarded socially and spiritually, and dissent is punished quietly, through shame, exclusion, or fear of eternal consequence. That's an incredibly efficient form of control. You don't need police when people police themselves. You don't need surveillance when guilt does that job for you. You don't need force when people are taught that leaving means losing their family, their community, their identity, and sometimes their sense of purpose. At that point, perception stops being purely voluntary, it becomes coerced by consequence. And this isn't accidental. Scientologists and historians have documented for decades that religious institutions have shaped behavior, not just through belief, but through social pressure. Rituals reinforce belonging, moral codes establish in-groups and out-groups, leadership structures centralize authority while discouraging challenge. Over time, belief becomes infrastructure, something people rely on to navigate their entire life from birth to death. This is where the power problem becomes obvious. Churches influence how people vote, how they raise children, how they view gender roles, sexuality, authority, and obedience. They shape laws indirectly through lobbying, voting blocks, and moral pressure. And yet many of these same institutes claim they should be shielded from scrutiny because they are spiritual, not political or corporate. You can't have it both ways. You don't get massive cultural influence without responsibility. You don't get to reshape public life while claiming private immunity. And you don't get to operate transitional networks of money, land, and authority while insisting you're just a place that people go on Sunday. And I want to be very clear here, because this matters. Belief can be meaningful. Community can be life-saving. Faith can help people survive grief, addiction, trauma, and loss. None of that is being dismissed here. What's being questioned is what happens when those deeply human needs are managed by institutions that no longer answer to the people they serve. When churches operate like untouchable corporations with opaque finances, political influences, legal installations, and moral immunity, they deserve scrutiny. Not hostile scrutiny, not mocking scrutiny, but the same persistent ritual scrutiny we apply to any powerful organization that affects millions of lives. Because history is brutally consistent on this point. Power that cannot be questioned will eventually be abused. Governments do it, corporations do it, empires do it. Churches are not exempt simply because they speak the language of the sacred. In fact, that language often makes accountability harder, not easier. Anything that powerful that refuses transparency isn't sacred anymore. It's protected. And protection without accountability has never ended well. Not in governments, not in corporations, and not in churches. Once power becomes isolated from the consequence, the institution stops serving people and starts serving itself. And that's why this conversation isn't about religion, it's about power. Before we jump into anything else, though, I want to pause here, because this is usually the moment where people start reacting instead of listening. Some of you are nodding along, some of you are irritated, some of you are already forming rebuttals in your head. And that reaction right there, that's the part that I think that is worth paying attention to. Because nothing I've talked about tonight required you to stop believing in anything. I didn't ask you to abandon faith or spirituality or whatever gives your life meaning. All I did was talk about churches and how they operate when they become too powerful, financially, politically, or culturally, and how those systems behave when they're protected from oversight for long enough. And I think that reason that makes people uncomfortable is because it's creating a split. On one side, there's the version of religion that feels personal, comforting, familiar, the version that helped you through something hard. And on the other side, there's that institutional reality, money, land, influence, silence, protection. And most of us are taught never to let those versions touch each other. But they do. They've always been touching. And once you see that, it's hard to unsee it. Because now you're not just dealing with belief, you're dealing with power. And power doesn't like being questioned. especially when it's learned how to hide behind something sacred. This is usually where people feel torn, where part of you wants to defend what you grew up with and the other part of you wants to start asking questions. These are the questions that you were never encouraged to ask out loud. That internal back and forth, that quiet argument in your head, that's not doubt, that's thinking. And that's kind of the point, because this conversation doesn't end with answers, it ends with tension, a split, two voices pulling in opposite directions, one reaching for comfort, the other reaching for truth. And once those two voices start to talk, it's hard to shut either one of them up. At least it is for me. So why don't you go to my comments section and tell me what you think? Because I've already told you what I think seriously, here on The Wit Show, where smart meets stupid and somehow makes sense. My name's Georgie, and I'm always thinking out loud so you don't have to.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is The Wit Show from What I Think Seriously to You.
WITS, The Wit Show.
Cool story, bro.
Look, faith helps people cope. It gives people hope when life doesn't make sense. It gives structure, community, something to hold on to when everything else falls apart.
So does a drug, so does a lie, so does an abuser who tells you they love you.
That's not fair. Faiths help people survive wars, grief, addiction, loss. You can't deny that.
I'm not denying it. I'm saying that survival doesn't equal truth. Pain makes people reach for anything that promises relief, even if that thing comes with strings attached.
But belief isn't control. People choose it.
Do they? Or are they raised in it, surrounded by it, afraid to question it, taught that doubt is weakness and leaving means losing everything they love?
Church gives people meaning.
Yeah, and so do pyramid schemes, and so does a cult, and so does toxic relationships that convince you suffering is growth.
You're being a little extreme.
No, I'm being honest, in a way that we're taught to not be. Because if faith was purely good, it wouldn't need protection from questions. It wouldn't need secrecy. It wouldn't need money, land, silence, or fear to survive.
So what are you saying, that it's all fake?
No, dude, I'm just saying that comfort isn't proof. Coping isn't evidence, and feeling better doesn't mean something is good. It just means it works. The most dangerous system in history didn't survive because they were true. They survived because they made people feel safe. So if this made you feel uncomfortable, then good. That means you're still thinking. And thinking is the one thing power can't survive without trying to shut it down.
You're supposed to be this conspiracy guy, not the rational guy.
I'm gonna do whatever I want to be, dude.
What? That doesn't... Whatever. Jarvis, roll the song.
Let's amplify! Sunday morning, clean clothes, clean slate, drop 10% just to pass the gate. They say trust us, don't ask why. Hands in the air, eyes to the sky. Gold-plated truth behind stained glass. Counting blessings, counting cash. Say it's faith, say it's grace, but the books stay locked in a private place. They tell you doubt is dangerous. Questions mean you're lost, but silence always comes real cheap when somebody else pays the cost. It's the business of belief. Tax-free saints on Wall Street, selling hope, buying peace. Sign the soul, don't read the If it was good, it wouldn't need the night. If it was love, it wouldn't need control. If it was God, it wouldn't own your soul. It's the business